Thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait a couple more seconds as people join the webinar, and then we will kick it off. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emmy Sauls. I am the Director of Marketing here at LenderLogix. Today we have on the call Patrick O'Brien, our CEO, and Olga Feinstein, our Business Development Rep. Before we get started, just so you guys know, you can go ahead and use the chat box if you have any questions throughout the presentation. If it's something that pertains to the group at a large scale, we'll try to answer it right on the call. Otherwise, if it's something a little bit more personal to your business or to your process, we will follow up after the webinar to further answer your question. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Pat and we'll get this thing started.
Thank you very much, Emmy. Okay, so matter at hand today, how lenders use loan milestones, automated tech to enhance the home buyer experience. And this isn't going to be an overly technical discussion, but I do want to frame the conversation a little bit by kind of getting just some definitions out of the way. And one of the terms that we use is API. That's one of the terms that we're going to throw around. And an API is an application programming interface. And basically what that is a fancy way of saying it's a piece of technology basically that lets two systems talk to each other. If you think about the systems that we use in the mortgage space on a daily basis, like our loan origination system is kind of the centerpiece generally. What an API does is an API lets that loan origination system talk to other pieces of technology. And communicate and send data back and forth to kind of make our job easier. So we throw that term around kind of in the technology space quite a bit, API. And what those APIs let us, basically what they are is they're building blocks. They let us kind of create experiences using, again, in the origination space, loan data to carry out different tasks or create experiences for our borrowers that maybe just aren't native to the loan origination system. So it really lets us create custom experiences versus just kind of using the basic functionality that might come out of the box with a piece of technology. So that's what an API is. It really lets systems talk to each other. And we'll get into some examples kind of on how APIs real life examples of APIs in the mortgage space. Another definition, which is a form of an API, is a webhook. And basically what a webhook is, it's an API that's driven by events. So basically what it is it's a light version of an API that basically says when, I'll keep throwing it back to the origination example, when something happens with a loan, it sends a particular piece of data or a block of data to another system to carry out a particular task. So a webhook, which is an API, along with other APIs, let the loan origination system just basically talk to other things, carry out tasks. I'll use an example. Anybody that's been in the origination business a long time knows the process of exporting files like a Fannie Mae 3.2 or now 3.4 file. And there may be some systems that you use today that still use that type of technology. And basically what that is, that's a manual extraction of the data from one system and pushing it over somewhere else. And in recent years, as APIs within the loan origination systems have evolved, we've been able to kind of get away from that. So you don't see that too much anymore. And that's because a lot of systems and technology providers like us are able to use APIs to transfer that data back and forth much more efficiently than using those type of manual exports. Why do we do that? It's a better user experience. So if we want one system to communicate with another, doing that via API is a much better experience for a loan officer. It's much better experience usually for a borrower versus there being kind of that manual process of extracting a file, importing it, and things like that. Just makes it a much more efficient process and a much more scalable process. So you kind of reduce kind of that manual movement of data around. And again, we'll get into some examples, maybe that'll kind of, this stuff will start to make a little bit more sense, but just really kind of wanted to get some of those basics covered. A few examples that you might be familiar with, or maybe, just, have a basic understanding of how some of these things work. APIs are available. Twilio is a popular API. Twilio is a company that allows the sending of SMS text messages. Data.gov is a pretty powerful API that's we actually access in the mortgage space because we're able to access a lot of census data, census tract data, which is helpful for purposes of CRA and things like that. USPS, they have a pretty powerful API that lets us validate addresses. So, maybe a loan officer might input in an address, or a borrower might input in an address into an online loan application. It's not formatted the way we want to, or this, city's incorrect or something like that. An API from that loan origination system would let us validate that information with the USPS without there being a manual component that the loan officer has to be involved with. And then there's others, Zillow, Property Data API. Encompass actually will focus a lot of this presentation around loan origination system API. So, kind of accessing some of these other systems out of Encompass and using the technology to do that. Google Maps, Clover Connect for collecting, upfront fees, appraisal fees, and things like that. The technology that exists within the loan origination systems is pretty powerful to be able to kind of interact with these third-party services, because a loan origination system can't do everything. It's not designed to. It comes out of the box, is a way for a lender to write a compliant loan, but doesn't necessarily always have the capability that kind of allows the lender to deliver the experiences they want to deliver based on, their value proposition and how they position themselves. APIs let the lenders do that. The loan origination system APIs are really what let lenders do that. Yeah, we'll talk through some use cases here. So, using APIs to kick off external processes from the loan origination system, extending the capability of the loan origination system so it can do more things. I've been in the business for 20 plus years, and it was always a common, there's always been this common thread, like loan officers always hated their LOS. It doesn't do this, doesn't do that. That's not really true. It's not designed to do that, but what it's designed to do is have the functionality, the API functionality available to do those things that a lot of loan officers say, oh, I wish it did this, I wish it did that. This type of technology, almost anything you can dream up can generally be done. And I think some of the use cases we'll point to in a second are kind of some fun things that we've sort of developed based on that type of feedback from loan officers, using that technology to just kind of prove like, hey, like a lot of, there's a lot that can be done utilizing this type of technology. So let's get into an example here. Let's talk about using a trigger or a webhook from a loan origination system to kick off an external process. In a few examples of that would be automating the delivery of text messages to a borrower when certain milestones are complete. So sending text messages to borrowers or realtors based on activity within the loan origination system automatically without a loan officer having to send a text message to say, hey, your loan's approved or whatever. Real-time lead follow-up. So you can use a combination of APIs to allow a loan officer to automatically maybe follow up with a lead that's coming through a third-party lead generation site like a Zillow, where it would automatically send a text message to a borrower when a borrower kind of interacts with that lead generation form. So it's really kind of sharing the information between these core systems automatically using that infrastructure, kicking off an external process outside of the loan origination system, but at the same time being integrated with the loan origination system to move that information back and forth. Let's take a sip of water here. Olga, is there anything you'd like to add on APIs here? Anything that you think I've missed so far?
Yeah, so we talked about the benefits of APIs for lenders, but I just want to make sure that we highlight how it benefits the borrowers too. Today's borrowers want quick and convenient transactions. So when lenders are utilizing APIs, they're able to send, immediate real-time information about the loans to their borrowers. So that's something similar to the SMS solution that Pat is going to be covering.
I think that's my next slide. Pretty close. Maybe it's the next slide after that, but let's focus the discussion around the loan origination system. How do we use data and activity from within the loan origination system to interact with other processes? And I could sit here, any loan officer could probably sit here and think of 500 things that should happen automatically. And that just off the top of my head, like I'm thinking here, like, so use data from your LOS to interact with other processes, avoid manual entry, reduce overhead, improve speed and quality. So I could use an API from Encompass to say when certain things happen within the loan origination system, it's a loan application, we have 6 pieces, we have a subject, property address, we have intent to proceed, and the borrower has signed their documents. Order a flood cert. So, kicking off that process based on what's happening in the loan origination system. And that's the type of thing that we're discussing today, and kind of some of the enhancements that have been made in the industry are kind of around that. Like, how do we kick off those processes automatically based on that loan activity? The example Olga brought up that I had originally mentioned something before about, like, we heard from a lot of our users who we were selling other pieces of software to, it'd be really great. Like, borrowers like to get text messages. They'd like to get text message updates about what's going on with their loan file. So I guess I, as a loan officer, can just kind of monitor my pipeline, and every single time something happens, just send that borrower a text message so that they know what's going on. And obviously, being a great loan officer, that's something some people do. But what if, in addition to that, the system automatically sent somebody a text message? Now, your loan origination system probably natively isn't set up to be able to send out text messages to your borrower. I mean, it's just not. It's not going to start sending loan updates out to your borrower. It can't be configured. That's kind of an external process where there's texting services that handle that. But how do we wire those two things together? How do we keep our borrowers informed? Maybe we want to send text messages to realtors as well, but the realtor's message needs to read something differently than the borrower's message needs to read. So how do we kind of communicate all that information, use the data that's in Encompass or our loan origination system in order to make sure that we can carry out something like that? And using APIs, we're able to do that. I'll talk through an example of how something like that might work. So a lender might say, I want to send a text message when the loan officer submits the loan application. I want to send a text message when that loan's been submitted to underwriting. I want to send a text message when that loan has been conditionally approved. And I want to send a text message when that loan is cleared to close. And I want to send the text message to a borrower. I want to send the text message to the realtors. So listing agent, selling agent, and potentially their admins too, if I have their information as well. So I want to send it to all those, messages to all those parties based on those things. You could configure, there's systems, like there's people like us that kind of wire those things up together and say, okay, let's use those loan milestones to say like, okay, once that loan has hit that milestone, we'll send the text message to these parties. And what we're doing is we're using a webhook to inform us that that loan has moved to a particular milestone. We're then making a call into the system to pull out the relevant information in order to kind of structure that text message. So, name, subject, property address, borrower's mobile phone number, realtor name, whatever the case is. So making a call in the system, pulling that information out, putting the text message together and sending it to all those parties. It's a really cool thing that the modern borrower expects that you're able to do using a combination of those technologies that we discussed. Getting that initial webhook to tell us it's events driven. We talked about that at the beginning. So the event is this loan has been submitted to underwriting. It's like, okay, so now that we know that loan's submitted to underwriting, let's call out the information that's necessary to structure this text message and send it out. So that's an example of kind of how the loan origination system, along with the texting system, can use the API infrastructure to send those messages out to borrowers, creating a positive user experience that just isn't native to the loan origination system. If you would have told me 10 years ago when I was originating loans that loan origination systems would be sending text messages to borrowers, I'd tell you you're pretty crazy. Using APIs to customize closing gifts. So I kind of alluded to earlier, like, let's talk about some fun examples of certain things that are done. And obviously, as we talk about these things, we'll talk about them in terms of the projects that we've worked on. And closing gifts is something that, again, we built this around hearing some feedback for our users. Wouldn't it be awesome if this? And this is kind of where this stuff came from. So we have a product that we call Operation Fido. And really the idea was this. Borrowers who have pets love their pets, right? Like, people love their pets. And as a homeowner moves from one house to another, always one of those pain in the neck things for any pet owner is getting an updated pet tag. It's kind of one of those additional things that you need to do. Well, we as the lenders kind of know all the information, right? Like, we know this person's buying a house. We know when they're closing. We know what the address of the house is. We know what the person's phone number is. What we don't know, kind of as part of normal 1003 data, is, do they have any pets? And if they do, what's the pets' names and how big are they? Those are the things that are unknown. But people love their pets. We have a lot of information that we could kind of like help them with that. So wouldn't it be cool if, as a homeowner bought a new house, we asked them if they had any pets, and if they did, we sent them a new tag. We sent them a new tag at their new house when the loan closes with the pet's name on it, and then we as the lender can put our logo on one side of it, and that would just be really just a 10-star experience for that borrower. Like, wow, you asked about my pet and thought about my pet and gave them, this cool tag at closing. So we kind of took a look at it, like, yeah, we can probably automate that process. So we kind of came up with this thing. It's like 2 out of every 30 homeowners has a pet. So, it's a positive experience for a lot of people. So what we did was we used that technology infrastructure that we've been talking about on this call to build this process. And how it works is a borrower will receive a text message automatically when that application is submitted. So it's like, okay, we're using a webhook to tell us that the application is submitted. We're making a call into the system to pull out the information that we need in order to kind of carry this whole thing out. And what we're doing is we're sending the borrower a text message asking if they have any pets. So that borrower is going to click on their text message, and it's going to give them a little screen that's going to say, hey, we know your pet might get lost in its new neighborhood, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your furry friend, and we'll send a tag to the house when you close. And like, if I'm a borrower that has a pet, it's like, wow, that's like a really cool experience that just my lenders, paying attention to my pet. So borrower clicks on that link and they answer a couple questions. How many pets do you have? What are their names? What's their size? And what happens is we hang on to that information. It's like, we know, right? Like we know the house the person's moving into. So we know the address that needs to go on the tag. We know their phone number because the borrower's given it to us. So we're calling that information. So it's a real simple process for the borrower. Like they don't have to do much. They're not filling out or ordering anything. It's just like, they're just kind of answering a couple questions about their pets. And what happens is we then hang on to that information and we use those webhooks to tell us more about that loan as that loan progresses to closing. So what happens is we don't order the tag at the point in time up front, at the point in time of application, because things can happen, right? Like the loan could fall apart, could underappraise, deal falls apart. You just kind of, don't want to go through that process then. But what we do is we use those webhooks. We use the infrastructure that's in the loan origination system to tell us, hey, this loan's clear to close. And when we then get that signal, that webhook from the system that the loan is clear to close, we then use an API to deliver the order to the manufacturer. So at that point in time, the manufacturer is now creating this custom tag for this borrower with the lender's logo on it, with that borrower's pet information on it, the new address, phone number, and they're putting a package together that they're sending to this borrower's new house because we know they closed on it. We use the webhook from the system to know that they closed. So it's not a surprise at this point. We're not just unsure, like, oh, should we send this thing? We don't know. It's happening automatically based on that loan activity. And certainly when you think about all this, you could do it manually. As a matter of fact, we had a client that was doing it manually, asking borrowers at certain point in times of the application about their pets, keeping a stack of papers when the borrower filled them out, cross-referencing a closing report at the end of the month, manually placing the orders when those loans closed. We were able to automate that process 100% using those webhooks and APIs from the loan origination system. I mean, what an amazing, you talk to anybody that kind of is on the receiving end of a package like this, just what an amazing borrower experience they get. And it doesn't require any work on behalf of the lender whatsoever. So the loan officer doesn't have to do anything. The processor doesn't have to do anything. It's all happening automatically based on that automation. So it's kind of a fun example of something you can do using those APIs and webhooks out of the system. Again, if you would have told me 10 years ago, like, oh, my loan origination system is going to be able to send my borrower a pet tag. Like, are you kidding me? Like you could barely get your transfer tax correct, let alone getting a pet tag sent out to your borrower. Excuse me. It's like $10 a tag. Like it's a cute little gift, a simple, very simple thing. It's inexpensive, but provides an amazing borrower experience without having to do anything, without having to have that operational headache of managing a process like that. It just happens automatically. Borrower gets a text message, answers a couple questions, and the tag shows up at their house. Amazing borrower experience. And the reason why it's something like that is able to be done so inexpensively is because of that level of automation. A person doesn't have to manage that process. It's all happening automatically based on that loan activity. Another fun example, cutting boards. We had a ton of, we sell many pieces of software, and we had some customers come to us since we were doing the pet tag thing and said, you know what, like, that's cool, that's cute, we love that. But one thing that our loan officers are doing is they're personalizing closing gifts for borrowers. And a lot of them are ordering these cutting boards. And, they're expensive, and it's certainly a manual process to get those things ordered. Like, is there something you could do? So we took a look at that process. Like, okay, I don't have to explain to you the reasons why something like that's cool, right? Like, it's, people love things with their names on them, obviously, and it strengthens the relationship, and borrowers get a nice, cool package, and like, you know, it's got their name on it. You know, it's got the lender's information on it. So it's like a really cool thing. I think looking at Emmy, she's got one in her background behind her there. So what we did was we looked at that process. So like, okay, let's look at the loan origination technology here, and let's use, similar to the Fido thing that we just talked about, the pet tags. Let's use some milestone activity to fire off this entire process. So what we did was, when a loan hits a certain milestone, let's call it clear to close or funding or whatever, that webhook is telling us, hey, a loan just hit clear to close, a loan just hit funding, a loan just hit closing, or whatever webhook we designate for that particular client. And once it hits that milestone, we then make an API call into the system, into Encompass, and we pull out the information that we need in order to put this product together. So what are we doing? We obviously need to send it somewhere, so we got to get the address. We have to get the borrower's last name to put on it, and you know, we can figure out or have conversations about, like, is it the primary borrower's last name or whatever the case is. So we have to get name, we have to get the address. What most of our clients like to do is put their logo and put their loan officer's information on it. And we do have some clients that actually put the loan officer's email address or put the loan officer's phone number engraved on this board as well. These things are like laser engraved. It's like a heavy duty cutting board. So what happens is that loan hits a certain milestone, webhook tells us, hey, this loan's funding, clear to close, whatever the case is. We make a call into the system. We pull all that data out that we need in order to do it. And one thing that I'll point out that's great about APIs is you're able to pull out only the information that you need. So whereas if I were asking people to export 3.2 files, 3.4 files, they have social security numbers and bank account numbers and balances and all this kind of nonsense, using an API, you just pull out the data elements that you need. I need an address, I need a name, I need loan officer information, I need loan officer email address, I need loan officer phone number. I call that out of the system, and it sends the order to the manufacturer directly using an API. So nobody's manually placing an order at this point in time. It's just simply happening automatically based on that loan activity. And, you know, going into some statistics about, well, why would that be cool? It's like, well, have something with the borrower's name, with your name and logo on it, sitting in their kitchen for the next 10 years, like, is going to be a pretty awesome way of staying top of mind with those folks versus, you know, handing them a business card. So what happens is the board is manufactured. Hold that board up. I mean, like, it's a little blurry there. Yeah, look at that. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, it's got a logo, it's got a name. Like I said, we have some lenders that put email addresses and put phone numbers on there as well. And it's calling this information out of the loan origination system, and it's the manufacturer is able to engrave all that information on there without the loan officer having to do a thing. It's sent directly to the borrower, so the loan officer doesn't have to take possession of a cutting board, figure out how to send it, ship it, all this kind of nonsense. It's able to be ordered and manufactured and delivered to that borrower all automatically, without utilizing internal resources like processors, marketing folks, or anything like that. Just happens automatically using those webhooks and APIs. It's like $35 a board is what we charge on something like that. And again, the reason why it's so cheap, like if you tried to go order a board for a borrower, you know, you're probably paying $60-70 before shipping. And that's like $35 shipped from the manufacturer to the borrower, because it's all automated, because there's not, you know, a lot of operational overhead on behalf of the lender, on behalf of the manufacturer to kind of facilitate the process. It happens automatically using those webhooks, using those APIs to kind of facilitate that entire process. Kind of the reason why we talk through those examples of the milestone text messages to borrowers, the delivery of pet tags, the delivery of cutting boards, is hopefully so that you can kind of think through what are other things that should be done automatically that you can use those webhooks, APIs, those signals to do automatically so that a human being doesn't have to do it. We're in certainly a time in the industry where we're looking at ways to optimize business, not, add operational headaches by having people do a lot of these tasks. So using those APIs and using those webhooks to carry out tasks. Like I said, I think we've given you 3 examples here between the text messages, the cutting boards, and the pet tags. I could go on and on. I'm sure you guys could do too, of thinking of like, wow, it would be really cool if it could do this. And the whole spirit behind that is it can. We're in an age where that type of thing can happen. Like I said, it wasn't that case 10 years ago, but now the loan origination systems have built this type of functionality to be able to carry these things out, these types of tasks out automatically. Emmy, before we wrap up, Olga, I don't know, anything I missed, anything you'd hope I'd cover, questions, anything like that? What do you think?
Oh, I think you covered it all. Definitely great way to keep your borrowers engaged during and after the sales process.
Olga,
Yeah,
you don't want to get into like JSON payloads or anything like that? Start talking about
No,
the
I'm
nuts
good
and
on
bolts of
that.
it? Good, okay. How about you, Emmy?
yeah, no, I think you did great. I did just add a picture of the board into the chat for those of you who wanted a closer look. I'm not sure if you were even able to see it when I shared it on the video, but added a picture in the chat if you wanted to take a look at it. Otherwise, no, I think you hit everything and I don't have any questions as of right now. So this will be last call from anybody on the webinar. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat.
Well, I hope
Right.
you guys, I hope it gave you some food for thought. I hope that you can kind of get a feel for sort of what it is, the types of things that we do here at LenderLogix, where we're trying to look at certain parts of the loan origination process and utilize this type of technology to automate things, to really just create like really awesome experiences for borrowers, awesome experiences for realtors, awesome experiences for loan officers, because that technology exists today. And you shouldn't, just because it's not native to the loan origination system and it just doesn't happen automatically, doesn't mean you shouldn't explore it. That technology exists. And I think it's only going to become more and more robust as time goes on. So thanks a lot for joining us. Any questions? There's some stuff on the screen here, scanning of QR codes and whatnot. But feel free to reach out to us with any questions or any further discussion. So appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. And this was recorded, so I will have the link out later this afternoon should you want to share this with your teams or just rewatch it for any type of information. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.